So social housing gives that sense of security for people rather than hostel accommodation or private rented sector. But we don't have enough social housing in this country. Crisis did a report last year, I think it was, saying that we need to be building 100,000 social homes every year just to get on top of the current demand. And the latest figures that we've got for 2017 show that we built less than 6,000. So that's how far short we're falling as a sector in terms of the need that's out there. Social housing to me is perfect, particularly for people who are in recovery. I think a lot of the time, if you take people out of an environment that's causing them harm, and you can put them into detox, and you can take them to rehab, and you can put them in a mental health unit, and then when they're in a stage where they need to go back, you're putting them right back into the situation that caused the problems in the first place, which is not going to help anybody. It's a toxic situation.
Okay, so this is the hostel over there. The corner just here was where all the sex workers used to congregate of an evening, basically right outside my window. And just opposite is where the drug dealers used to congregate, and you couldn't walk past without, do you want anything? Do you want any business from the sex workers? And that was every time you walk past after 8 o'clock at night, you could guarantee you get offered something, from anything from pre-gabs to crack, crystal meth, whatever you wanted. But luckily, I've never had an issue with drugs. But I can imagine for someone who's in recovery, who has got an issue with drugs, it would be quite difficult to live in a hostel such as that one over there, and resist temptation, especially if you're in there for a lengthy period of time, which on average is about 15-16 months in that particular hostel.
A friend of a friend that I was trying to help recently, and he was placed by the local authority into temporary accommodation out of area. He felt very unsafe, very threatened in this area. He had a diagnosed mental health condition, and he was in recovery. So he told the local authority that he didn't feel safe there, and they placed him somewhere else. But then that was only for one night, and then they immediately put him back into the place that he told them he felt unsafe. He's been there for quite some time, and he's no longer in recovery. He didn't feel safe there because dealers were hanging around outside, and he's now back on drugs.
The last 15 years I've struggled with addiction. Whatever the substance, it was always present. But the last 5 years was alcohol mainly. That brought me to my knees. I went to work with an agency, and I was finally given treatment, 3 months down in a new city. After completion of my treatment, I was offered a so-called dry house. This seemed like a perfect situation. But upon arrival, all my housemates were further on in recovery. They were out working. I was left on my own, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, with an off licence, dead opposite. It was inevitable failure that was going to happen. I can't justify what happened, but I think with the correct funding and the right research into housing people, especially in recovery, this could have been prevented.
I was addicted to heroin for about 22 to 23 years, and I'm very fortunate that I'm now in recovery. But I tried to obviously find recovery many times over those multiple decades, and definitely without a shadow of a doubt, one of the factors that made that very difficult was being homeless, classed as hidden homeless, as I was sofa surfing, living on people's sofas and floors, normally other using addicts' sofas and floors, which then sort of puts you in a position of being sort of exploited almost for drugs. And when you couldn't afford to give that person where you stay in drugs, you'd be asked to leave, or they could manipulate you with that, which was horrible. And I remember one time in particular where trying to find housing and get out of the situation I was in and get away from using addicts to find recovery, played a massive part in me actually getting worse within my active using. I was engaging with a drug service in Wellingborough, and they were also linked with another organisation that sort of helped people find accommodation, and they could also help with grants, etc., for your fees, your month's deposit, etc. And I had an interview with my key worker and this landlord, where he sort of made me feel very lucky that I was getting the chance to do this and that he wanted to help. I was really honest with him and told him about my drug problem, about my being in and out of prison, because at this point I'd not been out of prison again long, on a recall. And he said the people in the house that, they worked, they were professionals, they were lovely, and sort of stressed to me that, heroin wouldn't be condoned in his property, making me feel like I was going to be the black sheep of that property, And I had no choice but to sort of go through with this, and I felt really lucky to begin with. But when we met to sign the contract and stuff and hand keys over, I still hadn't viewed the property, and he said that he was busy and he didn't really have the time to do it, but not to worry because, I'd be very pleased with the property, as to speak. And I took the keys and I signed the contract before seeing the property, and when I arrived with all my stuff the day that I moved in, it was very apparent that, the picture that he had painted wasn't what the property was at all. Every other person that lived there was in active addiction. It was chaotic. The living conditions were disgusting. Every time the toilet was flushed, there was some sort of leakage in the drainage pipes in the ceiling voids, so urine and faeces would be soaking through the kitchen ceiling. Dealers in and out, cuckooing. And I sort of gave up. The only reason I found recovery was luckily for a treatment centre that I went through, and the aftercare process of that, and going into a safe dry house with no users, still connected to a service that, really helped micromanage my sort of going back into normal living as a normal human being. And the help that I got was the reason I believe that I managed to get clean this time.